Tanse. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kistabish. The Assembly of First Nations of Quebec and Labrador welcomed a new regional chief yesterday. Francis Verreault-Paul came out on top, beating out Cathy Martin, Constant Awashish, and Monik Kistabish. Francis Verreault-Paul is Innu from Mashtoyash, Quebec. He had been Chief of Staff at the Assembly of First Nations of Quebec and Labrador since 2023. Constant Awashish was one of Paul's main competitors, but it is Paul who will be the first new regional chief in over 3 decades, as Ghislain Picard has held the role for the last 33 years. Definitely some big shoes to fill. After a mix of emotions and reflecting, Picard announced he would be stepping down from the role after sending a letter to a number of chiefs last December. The Trudeau government announced on Tuesday the appointment of a special ministerial representative to conduct an external review of the Nutrition North program. At a press conference in Ottawa, Minister of Northern Affairs Gary Anandasangari announced Aluki Kotirik will take on the new role. She is a former president of Nunavut Tongavik. The government also announced $20 million has been set aside to deal with some of the food security challenges faced by Nutrition North. Last week, news broke that 3 Inuit women are suing the Northwest Company, alleging the company's northern stores are not returning the full New North subsidy to consumers. When asked if the new position and money are in the response to the lawsuit, Anandasangari had this to say.
Absolutely not. This announcement has been in the works for many months, and this is a response to a much broader set of issues that we've heard. As a government, we've heard. As a minister, I've heard in my relatively short period of time in this role, and we're hearing people.
A small First Nation in British Columbia is suing the RCMP for what they say is a lack of protection from drug dealers and other crimes. APTN's Tina House has that story.
Bella Bella is the home community of the Celtic Nation. It's a remote coastal town with a small population of just over 1,200 residents. Chief Marilyn Slett says that her community members have had enough and that the RCMP are not doing anything to stop crimes from happening.
When the RCMP put up their hands and say that, they, can't or, they won't enforce our bylaws, it provides for an atmosphere in the community where people that, may be doing something wrong, drug dealing and other, things, sexual violence or assaults, it really provides for, people feeling like they're unchecked.
The Celtic Nation leaders are in Vancouver to have this press conference to announce that they are suing the RCMP to force them to start doing their jobs. Named in the lawsuit is the Attorney General of Canada. They released this video of testimonials from community members who say they are disappointed by the lack of police response to increasing crimes, and in some cases, these crimes are taking the lives of their family members.
The relationship that the Celtic have with the RCMP has been fraught. We faced systemic discrimination and a deep sense of distrust.
When you need their help, they don't show up. They don't come. So, what does that say?
I lost my oldest daughter to fentanyl.
The RCMP folded his arms and he said to me, there's not much they can do. Our hands are tied.
Our community has bylaws to keep our community safe, and they include keeping our community safe from drug trafficking, creating a safe space for people that have been assaulted, and for keeping our community safe from trespassers.
Back at the press conference, Grand Chief Phillips says he is proud of the Celtic Nation in taking this bold step to protect their community members.
Public safety is a fundamental human right. Safety of property and home also is a fundamental human right. And our First Nations communities are in extremely dire circumstances with the opioid crisis. We're losing so many of our precious young people to overdose deaths.
Chief Slut says it's blatant racism from RCMP and them not enforcing bylaws.
There is no legal impetus preventing the RCMP from enforcing our bylaws. The only barrier appears to be the racism and discrimination that sees them ignoring Indigenous bylaws.
Despite the fact that the Celtic Nation know that this court case could be tied up for years, they want the RCMP to start doing their job and protect their nation. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
There's a political controversy raging outside the BC legislature this week. A Conservative MLA from Vancouver is in the hot seat after comments she made on social media over the weekend that have her own leader urging her to take them down. CTV's Abigail Turner reports on the allegation of residential school denialism and why it's coming up now.
The former Kamloops residential school is at the center of a heated controversy centered on a social media post made by Conservative MLA Dallas Brody.
The stand I'm taking is rooted in the need for truth.
The post, denounced by First Nations leaders as racist and abhorrent, reads, "The number of confirmed child burials at the former Kamloops Indian residential school site is zero. No one should be afraid of the truth." Her party leader, a former Indigenous Affairs minister, has already asked her to delete it.
I was concerned that there may be misinterpreted as opposed to being about the fact that there hasn't been any graves at that particular site or any bodies at that particular site exhumed or found. Versus the whole issue of the residential schools.
The Attorney General Critics post was made Saturday and remains up.
I don't think that standing for truth takes away anything from the severity of what happened at the residential schools. In fact, I believe that more truth is better and makes their case actually better.
Her post is about a lawsuit involving a BC lawyer who alleges mistreatment by the Law Society of BC to add the word potential before unmarked graves in the training materials about residential schools. 215 unmarked anomalies were found near the former Kamloops residential school in 2021.
I'm disappointed that her first question to me as her critic would be based on a form of denialism of residential school.
Just about every residential school in the country has a cemetery, has children who passed at a residential school who have been buried there. So that's just the facts.
The Union of BC Indian Chiefs says funding for further investigations of residential school sites has dried up, but investigations continue, and they're calling for Brody to apologize. Neither the Law Society or the lawyer involved are commenting as the matter is before the courts. Abigail Turner, CTV News, Vancouver.
Two Indigenous artists are performing at this year's Juno Music Awards in Vancouver next month. That story when we come back. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. With this year's Juno Awards coming up on March 29th, the show has recently added some new and current Indigenous talent to its list of performances. Haisla Nation's The Snotty Nose Res Kids have been announced, and they will perform for this year's Juno Awards in Vancouver on Sunday, March 30th. They recently signed with Sony Canada and released their 6th album titled Red Future. The rap duo is also up for 3 Juno nominations this year, including Rap Single for the song BBE, Rap Album for Red Future, and Contemporary Indigenous Group of the Year. Saddle Lake Cree Nation's very own Tia Wood will also perform on stage at the Junos. She too recently signed with Sony Music and released her first album, Pretty Red Bird, with such hits as Dirt Roads and Catch and Release. She is also a first-time Juno Award nominee for Contemporary Indigenous Artist. and her father Earl Wood with the drum group Northern Cree are also nominated for a Juno Award for Traditional Indigenous Artists of the Year. Ottawapiskat First Nations Adrian Sutherland and Juno-nominated fiddle player Brianna Lazant from Edmonton will also perform during the Juno honoring ceremony at the Vancouver Playhouse, also on March 29th. March might be just around the corner, but there's still a few days left in February and Indigenous Storytelling Month. CTV's Mick Fable attended one event at the Royal Saskatchewan Museum in Regina where one Ojibwe Mohawk elder was passing on her experiences and knowledge.
Look at everybody, Timothy. You see them?
For over 20 years, Hazel Dixon has been telling stories to entertain and educate children of all ages. The Royal Saskatchewan Museum has been one of her common stops, a place she says lets her have direct interactions with listeners. During the session, she tries to pass along thoughts and ideas of proper manners, as well as being a good person.
In my turtle story, I talk about how he got his shell. But do we always have to get paid when we help somebody? It's the right thing to do to help somebody. Okay? Kindness, respect, all of those things are in there.
Throughout the month of February, the Royal Saskatchewan Museum has held Indigenous storytelling sessions. In recent years, the museum has hosted the Solstice Speaker Series, an annual 4-part event revolving around truth and reconciliation. It's all a part of exploring oral history and respecting it as a genuine source of history.
We really do respect that tradition. So we want, in order to learn the Indigenous culture and heritage, that's one of the ways that we're able to kind of pass on that knowledge.
As Dixon's listeners walk away, she hopes to get them thinking about the world around them, as well as the vast amount of information books can hold.
I'm hoping that it encourages them to look and then get their imagination going, because to me, when I tell the story, I can see all the action happening in my head. So it's like I'm watching a movie. That's what I tell them. When you're reading, it's like watching a movie.
The Royal Saskatchewan Museum has one more storytelling session booked this month, which will bring in multiple presenters as well as high school students taking part. Mick Fable, CTV News, Regina.
We now want to tell you about this week's second web poll question. Over on our website, we ask, do you think the Prime Minister's handling of Jody Wilson-Raybould and his handling of the SNC Lavalin case has had an impact on Indigenous representation in federal politics? Your answers are yes, no, or unsure. You can go over to our website at aptnnews.ca to have your say. Another segment of Mother Tongue Teachings is up next, plus we'll tell you about a new documentary regarding some important Haida Gwaii history. We'll be right back. Starting on the east, rain in St. John's at 4, Charlottetown partly cloudy and 5. The Grand River -14 and Nuujawak -26. St. Jovite 0, Quebec City 0. Toronto 5, Peterborough 3. Big Trout Lake -13, Wawa -3. The Paw -6, Norway House -8. Sunny in Princess Harbour at -4, Winnipeg -1. -2 in Yorkton, North Battleford 1. Uranium City -18, Buffalo Narrows -4. To the west, Peace River 7, Fort McMurray 3. Calgary 13, Medicine Hat 11. Kamloops 14, Tofino 11. Dees Lake 5, Smithers 10. Old Crow -27, Rock River -19. Wrigley -17, Watee -16. Inuvik -24, Pawtuck -28. -28 in Chesterfield, Cambridge Bay -32. And Resolute -25, Arctic Bay -28. This year will mark the 40th anniversary of when a group of Haida people set up a blockade on a muddy logging road in what was then known as the Queen Charlotte Islands. The logging protests on Haida Gwaii ended peacefully and ultimately led to a historic agreement this month between the federal government and the Haida Nation. Using more than 100 hours of archival footage and audio, director Christopher Auchter's riveting new feature doc recreates the moment when the Haida Nation took a stand for the future. The documentary, The Stand, is opening theatrically in Vancouver this week. Christopher Auchter spoke with our Dennis Ward earlier. Here's that interview.
Christopher, thanks so much for being with us here. Your film, The Stand, premiered at the 2024 Vancouver International Film Festival, where it took home the Audience Award. Congrats on that. So obviously before the historic agreement was signed last week, why was the 1985 logging blockade something you wanted to make a film about?
Yeah, I wanted to make a film about this because my aunt and uncle were there in 1985. So this was a way for me to honor them, and I didn't know what it meant beyond the fact it was Lyle Island 1985 blockade. And so I thought this is a big part, I think, of our Haida history. I should really know this story. So that's the crutch of how it kind of began for me, and it opened such a wide door, such a huge story. Yeah, I just had to dive deep and try to tell it in the best way I could.
A big part of the Haida history, and like you said, a big story, but the action is referred to as a hidden true story of Indigenous resistance. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not often, it's rarely talked about outside of the Haida community, I think. I don't think much of Canada knows this story and that it happened, but it was done with such intelligence, I think, and such grace, and from all parties, it seemed, like even the RCMP and the Haida and the loggers as well. Like there wasn't really violence, right? But there's still a lot of tension, and the people are still putting their lives on the line and their freedom on the line to say there's no more logging here. So says the Haida.
I guess, kind of a hidden chapter in history, but hours, hundreds of hours of actual footage, and the images are striking, that we've seen them play out time and time again at other acts of resistance, though. Any thoughts on why history continues to repeat itself?
Well, I think it continues to repeat itself because there's I guess, because there's laws and there's the economy that keeps rolling over other people, I think, and especially with the First Nations and the Haida, for instance, we were quite down and out, I guess, in a lot of ways. After smallpox, our population decimated, and then there came residential schools and the banning of arts and the potlatch and residential schools, as I said. But so we had to watch while the land around us that had been sustained just kind of kept being poked at and pried, and their mines and timber, barge after barge was being taken off. And in 1976, that's when my Auntie Dolores Churchill stood up at the potlatch of Oliver Adams, who became Chief Gala, and said those very same things. Timber's just leaving the islands, barge after barge. Something needs to be done, and that was the galvanizing speech that moved the Haida into action and doing what they did, because they needed to stand up for the land that sustained us, or there was going to be no Haida culture left, and there's going to be no land left for us to continue. So it was now or never.
How does that blockade 40 years ago now play into the historic agreement recently signed by Canada and the Haida Nation recognizing Aboriginal title on Haida Gwaii?
Well, yeah, that agreement, it all started there at the blockade. This was the starting point. This is why it's so fascinating that I happened to start working on this film 4 years ago we were 2 months to finishing, and BC signed with the Haida to recognize Haida title. And then now just recently, Canada followed suit and signed recognizing Haida title as well. Like, such a far cry from where we were. It's even in the film where the Premier BC was like, they do not have it. They do not have the right to this land and stuff like that. And so it was just like it's an amazing journey, but that took half a lifetime for it to come. But it did come, and it's a joyous moment.
Well, indeed, and a really fascinating film. Like I said, the images are just incredible. Christopher, appreciate you taking some time to speak with us about it, and wish you continued success out there on the festival circuit.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you, Dennis. For I Love to Read Month, APTN is taking you to the roots of Indigenous languages. Each weekday, a knowledge carrier brings you a phrase of the day for our mother tongue teachings. Today, T.R. Wheatley takes you to the Capilano village in British Columbia to hear from Victoria Fraser of the Squamish Nation.
Squile and Sikaltanat. Victoria Fraser Queen Choletin Sna, Skotmish Snechim noch so Chin, Skotmish Chin a Snanaimoch Chin, Chinwa a moat not Humolston Bochomeoch. I'm Sikaltanat. My English name is Victoria Fraser. I am a Squamish language teacher. The phrase that I'm going to say is, I'm happy to see you. Hotlan squall when Quin's Quatch know me. Hot is good. Bin is my. Squallwin is feelings. Quin's Quatch know me. That I see you. There are different sounds in there that we don't find in English, like the like you're saying L, but you're still pushing out like you're saying teeth, like so hot. We have this underline KW, which is like a little further back in the mouth, and so it's like a sound. Squallwin. We have accents over our vowels, which tells us that the tone goes higher in that part of the word, and then it falls. So the rhythm of Squamish is it goes high and then it goes low. I didn't grow up with my language. I only started learning when I was 24. I'm 32 now, so I've dedicated a good 8 years, I guess, of just being raised in the language. Before that, I would listen to my language, well, both languages, because it's different from Vancouver to Vancouver Island. And just the feeling that I would get when I would hear it. I didn't know everything that was being said, but I felt it. Hotland squall when Quin's Quatch know me.
Special thanks to Victoria and the language and culture team at Squamish Indian Band for that lesson, and TR for putting that together. To hear other phrases of the day, check out our website at aptnnews.ca/mother tongue teachings. And that's your daytime newscast for this Wednesday, February 26th. We're back again for your evening newscast in a few hours. Make sure to join us then. Hi, miigwech masicho kwana. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again next day.